Good evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. This is CBC Windsor News. Thanks for watching. The provincial election campaign is officially on, and it is day one, and all four leaders launch their campaigns to be premier. With Doug Ford right here in Windsor. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop takes us through what they are each focusing on.
A new theme song for the Progressive Conservatives and a slogan, Protect Ontario. Leader Doug Ford kicked off his campaign in Windsor, the bridge to the U.S. behind him. He says this election is about responding to the 25% tariff threat by the U.S. and taking on Donald Trump.
You know me and the kind of leader I am. You may not always agree with me, and that's okay, but my record is clear. When times are tough, I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. I will work with anyone, and I will stand up to anyone.
The party also launched a new ad.
When we know trouble is headed our way, we need a fighter.
The NDP has a competing new ad, also painting their leader as a fighter.
I've spent my entire life fighting for working people and winning.
Marit Stiles launched her campaign in front of a noisy crowd of supporters and attacked Doug Ford.
Is he the guy for the job? No. Doug Ford standing up to Trump? No. Yeah, I say hell no.
She's pointing to her experience negotiating as a union leader.
Just look at Doug Ford's track record. Over and over, he makes
Bad deals for Ontarians.
The Liberal launch was more low-key, outside a primary health clinic in Barrie. Leader Bonnie Crombie with the local candidate, a family doctor. Their hats a dig at Ford's Canada is not for sale hat.
You can't slap a label on a hat and pretend you're a leader. Real leaders fix healthcare. Real leaders work, and they are on the job, not gallivanting around the province calling unnecessary elections.
Later, Crombie was out canvassing in Markham-Stouffville. She's promising to find every Ontarian a family doctor in 4 years if she becomes premier, something the PC government also committed to 2 days before the campaign started. Right on brand, the Green Party leader launched his campaign in an electric car.
See you guys, take care.
He painted a picture of Ontario today after 7 years under Doug Ford as premier.
Housing starts are down, housing costs are up. 2.5 million Ontarians don't have access to a family doctor. Unprecedented emergency room closures and hallway health care.
We now have a cost for this early election, $189 million, according to the chief electoral officer. He says that parties have until February 13th to get their candidates in place and nominated. And as for this unusual winter election, he says they do have contingency plans in place in case of extreme weather or something like a snowstorm. The last time that Ontarians went to the polls in the middle of winter, it was way back in 1883. And that year, it was also on February 27th. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's zero in on Windsor, Essex now. As you just saw, Ford launched his campaign on the riverfront this morning with the Ambassador Bridge and the U.S. as his backdrop. The PC leader made his pitch. CBC's Chris Ensing was there.
In a West End neighborhood that people feel is often neglected and beside the busiest commercial crossing in North America, Progressive Conservative leader Doug Ford told voters he needs another 4 years in power. Because if President Donald Trump's tariff threat becomes a reality, Ford will need to spend billions to save Ontario jobs.
Responding to the challenge will demand enormous action that was never considered as part of our current mandate.
Ford's backdrop framing his campaign's message that the 25% tariff threat on anything imported from Canada to the United States would be devastating, and he alone can handle the negotiations with Trump.
You know me and the kind of leader I am. You may not always agree with me, and that's okay, but my record is clear. When times are tough, I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe.
The tariffs are expected to hit manufacturers. Windsor's auto industry, deeply connected to Detroit, parts crisscrossing the border for vehicles multiple times. They could also hammer farmers and greenhouse operators. Essex employs tens of thousands of people growing tomatoes, cucumbers. About 90% of that shipped to the United States. All of this has left the region on edge, even as it welcomes massive investments in battery vehicle production, a brand new hospital, and an international crossing.
The potential threat of tariffs, we have to be extremely mindful on how that's going to directly impact our region, which is heavily reliant on export.
Just beyond Ford's rally-style stop, people reminding voters this is about more than the tariff threat. Windsor's public school board cut jobs in special education and runs a deficit. Its emergency department has one of the longest wait times in Ontario.
We need help in the classroom. What we're hearing from nurses and healthcare workers is we need help in the hospitals.
But behind Ford this morning, a symbolic reminder of the ever-present American threat. So was the riding picked by the PCs to launch this campaign. The NDP has held Windsor West for more than a decade. The PCs want to flip the seat blue.
Tony, can we just ask you about running here?
I asked PC candidate Tony Francis to talk before the event and after the event about why he's running and what he stands for. He said he didn't have time. Windsor-Tecumseh PC candidate Andrew Dowie says he's confident heading into this election.
The circumstances dictated that we need strong leadership who is going to make the case, make the deal.
Voters have about 4 weeks to decide who they'll elect. Chris Hensing, CBC News, Windsor.
We've got Colette Kennedy with us now. Colette, how is it looking outside?
Well, pretty good. I mean, when you take into account those temperatures, right? Still very much on the mild side, above freezing, 2 degrees for Windsor, and yet not that far away. Look at all this Arctic air in northern Ontario being kept at bay. So we're actually going to be doing fairly well over the next few days here. We do have some cold air that comes in overnight tonight, but then some milder days ahead. So -7 overnight with the winds, not as strong as they've been. We're talking about still a wind chill of -12. Now tomorrow afternoon I am going on the higher side, taking us towards 5 degrees as the next warm front moves in. But the tracking of that is going to be quite interesting in terms of what we'll be seeing. I will explain what I mean when I come back.
All right, thanks Colette.
You're welcome.
Back to local news now. We are learning more about the people involved in this week's fatal downtown shooting. Police say that both the victim and the suspect were clients of the Homelessness and Housing Help Hub.
It appears as an isolated incident at this time, so there's no indication that it's going to continue. But again, there's a gun on the loose, and we're always concerned for that for the public, and that's why we're stressing to the public, don't go near him. If you see him, identify him, call 911 immediately. We do have a street alias of this male as Ty. However, his full identity has not been confirmed, and we don't know if that's a nickname or just a street name. He is believed to be new to the area, and he has accessed the homeless shelter in the previous couple of days.
Witnesses in the area of the former Waterworld heard 3 shots on Monday morning. 53-year-old Sean Short was found suffering from a single gunshot wound. He was taken to hospital where he was pronounced dead. Police said the suspect was last seen heading east from Glengarry Avenue on foot between Brant Street and Assumption Street. Surveillance cameras recorded the suspect, but police said he changed his clothes and hairstyles multiple times that morning. Police say the motive for the shooting is unclear. Healthcare leaders hope that new supports recently announced from upper government will make a huge difference for those suffering from addiction. Jennifer LaGrassa highlights a key issue and how new funding might help.
The wait to get into an addiction treatment program is often one of the biggest hurdles someone will face in their recovery journey. But new provincial funding could bring a fix. Before we get into that, let's take a look at the problem. Before going into treatment, a person has to go through a few days of withdrawal management. That's also known as detox, and it helps a person quit their drug of choice. After this, people usually wait weeks or months before getting into a treatment program. One outreach worker says she knows how difficult that wait can be.
If they leave detox and they have nowhere to go, they end up back on the street, back using again, back in a bad mental health state, which then it takes a while to get them back to where they want to get back into treatment. So it's just a vicious cycle.
People have even died waiting for treatment, say some experts. So what's the solution? They're called stabilization beds, and they'll be funded through Windsor's newly approved homelessness and addiction recovery treatment hub. These beds will offer a new service in our region. There'll be a space for someone to stay after they detox and while they wait for treatment. One treatment provider hopes this will make a difference.
It was a piece of the puzzle that was missing. Having them come ready to really get into the treatment, I think that creates an efficiency for the system.
We don't know how many beds we'll be getting or where they'll be located, but those details are coming soon. This service, along with additional treatment beds, are in the works, and they're expected to be available at the beginning of April. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Windsor.
Back to our election coverage. Doug Ford says he will remain on duty as premier even as he wages a re-election campaign. But some opposition politicians say that his pair of planned trips to Washington could violate democratic norms. Sean Jeffords has the story.
We're going to be going down there on the 11th and 12th of February to meet the senators and congresspeople and other stakeholders in the U.S. Then I'm going to go back down on the 20th for the governor's meeting as well.
PC leader Doug Ford promising to fight Trump's tariff threats, even as he fights for re-election. But those two Washington trips are the subject of questions as the snap election begins. Opposition parties say Ford cannot conduct provincial business while on the campaign trail, and that pushes the boundaries of a long-standing democratic norm called the Caretaker Convention.
That convention is part of Ontario's election preparations. It sees Ontario's premier and cabinet remain in place while pausing all non-emergency decision-making. It aims to give all of the parties an even playing field during the campaign.
Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie says that Ford should cancel both trips to Washington.
He cannot use government resources or taxpayers' funds to advance his own political interests. That's what's at the basis of the Caretaker Convention. He should be here. You can't wear multiple hats. I'm sorry.
NDP leader Marit Stiles says the PC leader is leaving his post at a key time.
Doug Ford, he quit his job as premier when he called this election. I'm running for his job.
The head of Ontario's civil service says in a directive to staff that there are some instances where the convention can be broken. Such circumstances might include a provincial emergency or a national or international event or occurrence where the premier or minister are required to exercise their duties. Any such involvement and related activities will need to be cleared in advance with the Premier's office in consultation with my office. But former Liberal Minister John Malloy says ministers are warned against using their position and platform during a campaign.
The advice you're given is stay the heck away from your ministry. You're going to have to pick things up after the election if you win. And if not, things are very much on a low-key basis.
York University professor Zach Spicer says Ford's plans are a gray area in the convention. He could argue Trump's threat is an emergency.
I think the opposition probably wouldn't have much of a problem if the premier, very quietly stepped off the campaign trail for a couple of days, headed south, met with the people who he's intended to meet with, tried his best to advance Ontario's agenda, then very quietly returned.
The PCs have said their party will pay for the trips, not taxpayers. And the Tory leader appears set to make the trips next month, despite the criticism. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
The Bank of Canada has cut its interest rate by 25 points, bringing it to 3%. But officials warn that Donald Trump's tariff threat is clouding Canada's economic outlook.
I do need to be clear, it's still going to be difficult to be precise about the economic impacts because we have little historical experience with tariff changes of the magnitude that the U.S. is contemplating.
Officials add that without a trade war with the U.S., the country's GDP growth is expected to strengthen this year, with inflation remaining close to the 2% target in recent months. The latest cut marks the 6th straight reduction since June. It's also a smaller one to follow 2 heftier cuts. The key rates were slashed by 0.5 percentage point both in October and December. And coming up tomorrow on Windsor Morning, a conversation with the captain of the Samuel Risley, an icebreaker that is hard at work this winter in the Great Lakes. That is tomorrow on Windsor Morning on 97.5 FM. Let's take a live look outside there as well. Another milder day for us. Hope you got to enjoy it. And it is also Lunar New Year. So happy celebrations to all who are welcoming the Year of the Snake. And when we come back, the very latest on Trump's possible tariffs as Canada expects a move on that in the coming days. Stay with us. Welcome back. Canadian political and business leaders are scrambling to prepare for possible U.S. tariffs. And with that measure set to be implemented in just days, there is a heightened sense of urgency. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with the premiers again today. Kate McKenna has more.
The head of the Bank of Canada says Donald Trump's next move could change the whole economic outlook.
The potential for a trade conflict triggered by new U.S. tariffs on Canadian exports is a major uncertainty. This could be very disruptive to the Canadian economy.
Trump said tariffs are coming to Canadian goods on Saturday. They could plunge Canada into a recession.
Everything's urgent as we're, trying to navigate, a fairly uncertain environment.
Trump has said Canada can avoid tariffs if it strengthens border security. But Canada's public safety minister says the border is safe.
We know that less than 1% of all fentanyl entering the United States comes from Canada. We know this because American data has told us that that is the case.
The federal government pledged over $1 billion to a border package, which included new helicopters. But it hasn't seemed to change Trump's mind, leaving some lawmakers unsure what would convince the president to back down.
Things are not going to get solved in a couple of weeks. And even determining exactly what it is that President Trump wants is not a simple thing.
Meanwhile, Canadian industry is left with uncertainty, saying if big tariffs come, they need financial support from government.
Canada's industries cannot withstand such a potential shock to their operations.
The premiers and prime minister met again.
Much of the meeting was focused on the conversation of supports. I, here in New Brunswick, with the support of some of my colleagues, had been calling on the federal government to bring some things to the table.
A big bailout package would require parliamentary support from opposition leaders. One premier warns against any move to block financial aid.
Very simply, this is not about you. It's about workers. It's about their families. It's about a historic moment in Canadian history. Our identity, our unity is under attack. Our workers are under attack. Put your political agendas aside. There'll be plenty of time for that.
Some top Canadian officials are planning to meet on Friday, hoping to have a clearer picture of what Trump intends to do. In the meantime, they're meeting with American lawmakers to try to convince Trump to back down. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
In response to Donald Trump's tariff threat, some Canadian consumers are vowing to boycott American goods. But that's not as easy as it sounds. Lindsay Duncombe explains.
We've been hearing it from politicians for weeks now. They're saying in the face of these American tariff threats, Canadians should shop at home, buy Canadian. Now that's something that's easy to say, but not so easy to do. The reality is there are lots of goods Canada doesn't produce and a lot of food we can't grow, especially in winter. In order to buy Canadian, shoppers need to do research. They need to be prepared to make substitutions. And the reality is you're probably going to have to pay more. We talked to some experts about how to buy Canadian, and they said the easiest place to start is the grocery store. There, it should be pretty clearly labeled. You can see if your apples are from Washington or if they're from the Okanagan. The grocery store is where you also might have to make some substitutions because take oranges. There are no orange groves in Canada. So if you like juice in the morning and you want to buy Canadian, then you just might have to substitute and start drinking apple juice. And when it comes to cost, yeah, it might cost you a bit more. And it's not just for food. That's true for clothing and for furniture. The reason is Canadian products are often made at a smaller scale, and we have different regulations, higher labor costs. The experts we spoke to said that means this might be prohibitive for some people to buy Canadian, but they did say to start small. Buy Canadian where you can, do some research, and that if you are able to make some changes, it would be supporting workplaces and people and the industry here at home in the face of those looming tariff threats. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
We will have Colette Kennedy back on the program with us right after the break to tell us more about the forecast in the days ahead. Stay with us.
You.
We've got Colette Kennedy back with us now. And Colette, it is Lunar New Year today. So lots of folks in our community, they're going to be out and about celebrating in the coming days. So what should they know about how the weather is going to be treating them?
Well, I feel like this happens around Lunar New Year, that we get kind of some, wacky weather where the temperatures do a lot of ups and downs. Mostly we're going to be on the mild side of things, but tonight, that's a different case. So you do have to be dressed appropriately for that. Our temperature even starting to drop at midnight last night. We were up around 4 degrees. Then the top of the show, we were still at 2, and now here we are at 0. So that temperature is going to keep sliding off. And, it does dip quite dramatically once, first of all, because we're getting that Arctic air pushing in, but after the sunset as well. So here you are with those sustained winds. Now we're more into a northerly flow or northwesterly moving in. A couple of systems to take note of coming our way. One to the west of us and one, this is a Texas low. Both are going to be kind of tracking because of the upper winds and the jet stream towards the Great Lakes and having an impact on some regard, mostly bringing the milder air, but into southwestern Ontario. For now, the winds are still strong enough. They are driving squalls. There were some road closures up around off of Georgian Bay and some areas where they're still looking at reduced visibility and snow squall warnings. We'll have a quieter night overnight tonight and for the start of the day tomorrow. And with any luck, there does look like there's going to be a little bit of cloud cover wants to hold in there. With any luck, though, we'll have sort of variable skies where we get a decent amount of sunshine around mixing with the cloud, plus some milder temperatures. So I actually think tomorrow is going to be a really nice day. I mean, a bit breezy, but a pretty nice day for the end of January. Then here comes the system. We've got the one coming from the west, but this one from the south, as it's tracking in, the exact track, really important because it may bring us some significant rainfall overnight Thursday into Friday. And if it slides a little further north, we'll see even more warmth a little further south. And then we get into a bit of a mix. But it looks like this is going to be rain because of those milder temperatures. And then it slides on through and some colder air will come in on the backside of that to start the weekend. Overnight tonight, -7, even though the winds will back off a little bit through the overnight until they ramp up again tomorrow, but it's still going to give us a significant wind chill, feeling like closer to -12 or so. 5 degrees tomorrow. Yes, that's what I'm going with. Then 3 on Friday, and then a cooler night Friday night into Saturday.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
And thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good night.